And I'm Tiffany Shlain. I am a filmmaker. I made a film called Connected, which definitely was first-person filmmaking. And I'm so happy to be here with Jennie Livingston, who's such a great filmmaker and working on her own first-person film. So Jennie, you want to do your formal intro of yourself?
I'm Jennie Livingston, probably best known for Paris is Burning, although I've also done Who's the Top, Through the Ice, Hotheads, working now on Earth Camp 1, which is a first-person film. And although Sawyer had said we should introduce each other, I'm going to say that I love Connected. And so Connected really made me think about filmmaking that not only has a personal story and an emotional story, because that film is kind of like a love letter to your dad, but it's also, you're an unabashedly pointy-headed intellectual. And I admired that. Like, you're like, I'm pointy-headed and I'm proud. And I have a personal story, and I'm going to make you think and feel, and think and feel, and so I love that.
You know, you're helping us on something else that we're working on. First of all, thank you for those kind words. Think and feel. That's, I think, the combination. There's many films that make you think, and there's many films that make you feel. And if you can intertwine them, I think that's a powerful combination. But you know, making that film was very hard, like they all are. But originally, it was all the make you think, and it was all very left brain. And I had one of those moments where the film wasn't working. I'm sure any filmmaker listening can relate to that, and you can relate to that. And I was going through this very traumatic year, losing my father, and I realized that the only way to kind of understand connectedness was to explore my own connectedness. It was the first time I was ever in one of my own movies. I had made 8 films up to that point. I was very scared to do it. And I'd always had usually men narrate my films, like what the fuck was that about? And I mean, I love Peter Coyote, he's an amazing narrator, but I was also the moment that I started narrating. Part of Connected is like half Peter Coyote, half very left brain and intellectual, and half me narrating, which is from the heart. So that film was kind of half and half. And now finally my films are actually, I narrate them all myself. But I feel like that film was a journey to find my voice also. And to own that what those words are in a film or what I'm thinking. And that was, I think that was a big breakthrough just as a person and as an artist. Do you find, I mean, what was your journey? First of all, tell us a little bit about your new film.
Okay, so I made this film, Paris is
Burning, which was like breakthrough, amazing. It's being honored by Sundance right now. What's the anniversary? It's
the 24th anniversary or 25th, depending on how you define it. It's the Sundance Collection film. So like last year, their films were Hoop Dreams and Clerks, and this year it's Paris is Burning. So it's a big honor, and you're like, whoa, I can't believe 24 years went by, and I can't believe they picked me, because there are really a lot of worthy, amazing films they could have picked. So it's exciting, and one cool thing is I'm here with some of my executive producers. You're one of them, actually, and we're talking about this new film, Earth Camp 1. And Earth Camp 1 it's an essay film. It's a memoir. It's creative nonfiction. I don't know what the terminology is, but it's about.
Isn't it funny, like the essay, because I used to say essay too, cinematic essay.
Now, what do you say? What do you call it? Like when you talk about Connected? What do you say? I know you said autoblogography, but what do you say when you're using?
Yeah, well, we kind of made up that funny word, autoblogography, and that was actually at the time where people were just doing blogs and people were learning how to express themselves online. But I still struggle with it. I like first-person films. I think that's very powerful. I think the problem with essay, although I love the term. This professor just wrote to me last week. He's like, "What do you call your films?" I'm like, "Cinematic essays." I mean, I don't.
Right.
I struggle. It depends who I'm talking to on how I feel like they'll understand it.
You know, Jamie Wolf, who's one of my EPs, she suggested narrative nonfiction, which I think is interesting too. I like creative nonfiction. I mean, whatever. Essay film.
Well, you know, I was at this event, and Sawyer, I think I told you, Sawyer, who's my co-writer and producer here, who's also moderating, but there was this great line where somebody said, I hated nonfictions are not called narratives because every film should have a narrative.
Yeah.
Right? So
our lives are narratives.
Everything's a narrative, right? And any good documentary's got a 3-act structure, and you know, it's got So the term narrative needs to be certainly brought back. So you're calling it narrative. I mean,
Nonfiction narrative, which sort of juxtaposes two terms that are normally put as different.
yeah,
It means that narrative is all of our
it
story.
still takes you a couple steps to get to what it is.
You know what really bothers me is every year the Oscars happen and they announce the one documentary, they announce the category and they say, we're all making stories, but here's the one category where it's reality. And if you're a documentary filmmaker, you're like, you're constructing something in an editing room, and if that's reality, then I'm,
exactly
a spaceman. So, whatever. What I love is I feel like fiction is the best fiction films are when someone knows something deeply or they researched it deeply. Like if you've ever seen On the Waterfront, he spent like 3 years getting to know that world before he wrote the script. And the best nonfiction films or documentaries are where it's a very, very precise, well worked out construction. So I think of them as I don't think of there being such a sharp division.
Yeah. But I think, I actually really don't like the word documentary. That
I agree.
I never feel like that fits my work. And actually, I feel like, I'm not going out and looking for a story generally. I'm usually, at least not in my work. And there are documentary filmmakers that really do that and do it really well. And our show, The Future Starts Here, which is also kind of its own thing, and it was got nominated in this category for the Emmys that I loved the name of the category. It was the first one that fit, and it was called New Approaches in Arts, Lifestyle, Culture. And that's what we're really talking about. This is a new approach. And it was the first category where I was like, yeah, that fits. That fits. Mm-hmm. And actually, Maria Popova, who does Brain Pickings, I don't know if you know her work. She's this wonderful writer. But she's like, oh, your films are cinematic thinking. And I was like, oh, I love that. Cinematic thinking.
Nice.
But, I guess, it's always, I've never felt like, in the story of my life, I never felt like I fit in a box. But, tell us more, tell us the components of your new film.
So I'll say it's about how I lost 4 family members in 5 years, which I always, after that, say don't try it at home. And then I want people to laugh. Thank you, you laughed. I appreciate that. And it's also about a hippie summer camp I went to in Northern California called Earth Camp 1. The connection being that when you're young, you often want to break away from your family and find different cultural markers. What happens when they leave you? The film also will have animation about different conceptions of the afterlife. And it's a broad, it's both my story, like who was my family? What was it like to lose them? What were the specifics? But it's also a broader essay on impermanence, which your film, Connected, is as well. How does this culture, meaning American culture, view impermanence? What is our approach to death? What happens to you when you have multiple losses and trauma? Do people come and help? Do people shy away? And of course, the purpose is to connect my tiny experience, the microcosm of my tiny experience, to the macrocosm of what does it mean if we have certain attitudes of avoidance? If we feel like we're impervious and we can't, in a way, I think we go to war very easily because we feel we don't die, and those soldiers won't die, and those other people won't die. And if we're feeling impervious and we don't own our own fragility, how then can we connect to other countries or other people? I think it's at the core of empathy, is what I'm saying. And I think my film, it's not an advocacy film. You can't go to Washington and advocate to end mortality. It's a nice idea. But,
they're talking about that a lot in Silicon Valley.
Well, anyway, that's what my film is about.
I love what you said about empathy. And, actually, my husband lost his dad when he was quite young. And I felt like he was tapped into something very deep that I hadn't tapped into when I met him, but I felt it, that he felt the fragility of life. And since I lost my dad, I'm sure you feel this way too, I feel like death is like right there. Like every day, it makes life so much sweeter, but I think about death a lot, not in a bad, unhealthy way. It's just like, this is a brief time you have here. And so it probably makes me take more risks and hopefully appreciate things more. But I think it was one of the best lessons I mean, if your film can, you know, I mean, I'm a big believer, especially with Connected, and the wonderful response to that film was just, you know, if you speak your truth, you're going to speak to something deeply universal. And that was a guiding principle. Actually, James Joyce has a great quote. You should, like, tack it up to your editing station.
Okay.
You know, when you speak your truth, you speak to the universal truth. And I remember, actually, Caroline Labresco at Sundance, because the film, to my investors originally, yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
To my investors, it was, I pitched a film that was all intellectual about the history of connectedness, and I remember that fateful day when I had to, like, I think I first called Geraldine, and I was like, you know, it's taking a different turn, and I think it's going to be much better, but I was so scared. I remember talking to Caroline, because I was almost going to, Sir, do you remember when we were almost going to submit the film, when it was, like, so not ready to be submitted?
It was, like, half black. There's like no film there. You're like, it's so close.
I know. But I remember
picture it.
Right,
You know where it's going.
Other films at Sundance, so I'm like, you can trust that this is all going to work, right? But we didn't submit it. But I remember Caroline said, you know, if you're going to take it to make it a personal film, you better be honest, because people can sniff when you're not being totally authentic and honest. And that was
so true.
That was a real guiding, like, in some scenes, you know, there's one scene in there that I still somewhat cringe about, but I knew I had to get in there, but just me totally losing it at my dad's funeral. And
so here's actually a question from the audience, and by the way, anybody who's listening in can type a question and I'll see it, and we can hand it off to these women. But what are the biggest fears about going so personal in your film?
Wow. Tiffany, do you want to take that one first? Do you want me to take it?
I mean, I think just speaking what I was saying is that just being so vulnerable. I mean, you know, I had spent years, you know, doing the Webby Awards and doing all these films where there was a lot of things between the film and me. And when you do something, you know, I mean, I got great reviews, but I got a couple that were not great. And of course, you feel you're taking it personally, and you have to really, like, it's not this a film, but it's a film about you, so they're critiquing you. But I think as I get older, I'm less, I'm kind of like, this is who I am, and I really found my voice by being super authentic, connecting my voice with me and my thoughts. But yeah, it was very scary. I'm not as scared anymore about it, I can tell you that, because I saw the response. I mean, the response at the screenings, I never got such a sense of connection with my audience as I did with Connected. I mean, I've gotten great response, but it's different. It's so personal. But I don't know. What are your?
So I'm in midstream, right? And my film has it has narration over archival footage. It's like my parents as DPs, as directors of photography, because they shot this very beautiful 16mm footage. And I'm also doing animation, and I also have a big audio archive that I'm working with, and I'm mining. You know, I have a terrible memory. You know, I just ran into someone here who knew me in high school. He was like, "You didn't remember me," and I was like, "I don't remember anyone." You know, I'm sorry, but I had journals, and so I kept journals, and the journals, when I read them, I'm like, "Yeah, that's how it was." So my fear is that. Just exactly what you said, that I won't be authentic, that I'll invent a version of it that's like what I wanted it to be or how I want other people to perceive it. I don't want that. And my fear is just, you know, I think my models are people like James Joyce and Virginia Woolf and Melville, and my models are, you know, people or even memoirists like, say, Nick Flynn, who wrote Another Bullshit Night in Sup City, or Alison Bechdel, who wrote Fun Home. And so I guess my fear is that I won't tell it simply, truthfully, beautifully. You know what I mean? I want it to be spare and lovely and truthful, and I have so much material. And I think, you know, it's like the fear of a writer, you know, that I want to make something that resonates and want it to be great. And, you know, that's why I like Connected, because it really hit me deeply, and it gave me faith in the medium, you know, of a film that would be a first-person story, but also connect to a world of ideas. You know, and obviously The Gleaners and I is another film that does that. Other films that do it. But I think when you work, the problem about working in this medium of first-person cinema is that people, it's associated with self-indulgence.
Right.
People use the word self-indulgence, and they think if you talk about yourself, that means you're being indulgent. I think memoir was that way 20 years ago.
Well, that's the irony, is that, right, memoir, I actually wrote it, when Connexy came out, I wrote a whole piece about this, that when the memoir first came out, that was very radical, somebody writing about their own life, and now you go to the bookstore and it's like 60% memoir, and ironically, there's still hardly any autobiographical films, and when Connected, I mean, Sawyer, remember we were looking because we wanted guideposts. So I think at the time there was, oh wait, I'm forgetting that great film by Jonathan. He made it for like $140. That's what it was being touted as. Tarnation. Sorry.
And Sherman's March, right? I mean,
Yeah, Sherman's March, Tarnation. We watched all those. I mean, there was 5 of them. There was not many. It was like I studied film history, and we went back, and I'm being facetious about 5, but it was so few.
Yeah.
And I really think that's going to change, because suddenly everyone's documenting themselves with Facebook and Twitter and Vine, and I think people are realizing how to tell their story in all these new mediums. So I think you're going to see it more, but you still don't see a lot of it. And so
the truth is, it can be done badly. It can be done self-indulgent, and Hollywood movies can be terribly self-indulgent. To the tune of an executive decides that $300 million has to be spent on something stupid. What's more self-indulgent than that? It is a risk, and that anything will be done poorly. Your goal is, and if it's you speaking, you're particularly anxious that it be good. Because it's you.
I have a great thing that helped Sawyer and I and our whole writing team. Those 4 of us in editing. We had a story consultant come in. That was actually a really pivotal moment, because I did not want to get lost in my own life. Because fear. That was another fear, is like just losing perspective. So when we decided to make it personal, we need your guidance, because I don't want to get lost, and I need your help finding my arc, because it's like arc. And I remember she had us take the film apart. So basically, we had the intellectual film, and we had 3 acts, and we made its own arc, and then we had to make a separate film that was the personal film that had 3 arcs, 3 acts, and an arc. And then the most exciting time I remember is when we were trying to weave them together, and when the personal and the intellectual just clicked. I remember we were talking about the environment, and I was linking it to cancer, and there was this one line, growth for growth's sake is cancer, and I meant the industrialized country taking over the environment, but of course I also meant this cancer that was growing in my father in his brain, and I remember that link, and those were the most exciting moments in the edit, but it was so helpful to have an outside story consultant, which we had never worked with before.
One more question here, which might actually lend to where you might be going right now, Jennie, is with all of this about the first-person storytelling, how do your voices as women and queer women, in your case, Jennie, how does that complicate and maybe encourage these voices as well?
One thing I wanted to say about, and I think it touches on that question, is I gave a talk here at Sundance the other day at the Waldorf Astoria. It was an event to introduce some people to the project. And I quoted Tabitha Jackson, who's the head of documentary here at Sundance, gave a talk at Doc NYC. And she said that what she likes about documentary film is essentially the complexity. She said stuff like she likes questions, not answers. Basically complications, not simplifications. Another one she said was a truth, not the truth. And I think that there are fiction pieces that are more like journalism, more just saying, we know global warming is bad and we know we have to stop it. We need films like that. There's nothing wrong with a film like that. But some of my favorite films are films that are about a political issue that I needed to know about. And there maybe are several sides of things, but maybe it's a little clearer. There's not 2 sides of genocide. But I think what we need are more films where there are a lot of questions, and we can explore, like what I love about your film and say The Gleaners and I is the complexity, that it asks the audience to deal with the complexity. And I think although there's certainly male intellectuals who are very complex, I think the way that women have been asked to live, you know what I mean, which is to not just live in their heads, you know, whether it's raising children or, you know, just being asked to be more empathic. Men are, of course, empathic, but they're allowed to be less empathic by the society. And I think, I think there are men obviously working in the first person, like Jonathan Coët made an amazing film, but I think we're well suited. That's all.
I love what you're saying, because we're just writing this proposal for something else, and I think it's the combination of the thinking and the feeling that's very potent together. I remember, you know, stories are a vessel for ideas, right? I mean, I love that idea just in general. And I think the power of a personal doc is that thinking and feeling really intertwine. Because I listen, I watch a lot of shows with my kids that are very intellectual. I mean, very in your head, Cosmos, or you know, and I'm enjoying it. And
I love Cosmos. I loved it.
I mean, and, you know, it's rare to find a show that I can watch with my kids and feel like we're all learning. But you know, but I don't feel emotional in the movie, and I feel that lack of emotionality in it. And I think that is a strength. I mean, I think as I get older too, I'm much more kind of like, let's cut the bullshit. You know, like the things that bond you to people are emotional. I actually think women do that very quickly. Women will quickly identify. I'm making a sweeping generalization here, but I find with women, I will quickly bond on the thing that's difficult, or that's something that just happened, usually in a woman's bathroom. No, I'm just kidding. But my mother, as a psychologist, says, you know, success distances you from people, and vulnerabilities bring you closer.
Right.
So I find I understand that more now, and I'm more comfortable with myself just as I've gotten older, and I don't mind just like going into the things that are scaring me or whatever to like before I go into the idea. Like my first film at Sundance was about reproductive choice, and it's called Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness, and I used humor as a tool to crack people open to this very heavy issue of reproductive choice. There's a lot of humor in it, and as soon as I make them laugh, I mean, it's very deliberate. The writers and I would make them laugh and then tell them something heavy. So the laughing would get very stiff feelings about reproductive choice and open you up and then go on in. As I get older, I still use the humor. I love using humor as a tool, but it's the emotion that opens people up to get to bigger ideas. It's just like a conduit to feeling something and understanding something more deeply.
Tiffany, I have a question for you, and it's about density. Because one thing, like the first work of yours I ever saw was The Tribe, and because we were together at Sundance, and I had a short called Through the Ice, and you had The Tribe. Yeah. One thing I loved about that piece was how dense it was. That you were like, ideas, images, and it just didn't let up, and it was really smart and fun, but it took the viewer on a ride. You know, like you couldn't just sit back. You had to like be right there with. What do you think about that, like density versus spareness in terms of your work past and present?
That's an interesting question. You're asking us questions as we're working on this proposal for a new something, and it's the questions. Well, our new show now is The Future Starts Here, and they're all 5-minute episodes. And they're pretty dense. Would you say they're as dense as The Tribe, Jennie? I mean, I'm curious what you would think.
I would say they're more spared.
I think that both density and sparseness on the ends of the spectrum give a lot of credit to the audience that they're gonna be on that journey with you. And I like any art form that gives credit to the audience, that they can go there, that their attention span and their minds and everything are going to be able to expand in that direction. So I think they're actually similar in some ways.
Well, I think this new show that we're working on actually has a lot more room for space, and I'm ready for that. I mean, I think the combination of, you know, because I never do this, which is what I call talking heads. I don't do them in any of my films, and I guess I'm understanding I mean, like from this 20-minute conversation right here, I bet you there's like 3 minutes of some beautiful moments that I could pull out. I mean, there's probably more than that, but that's probably what we could turn this conversation into. But I think I almost look at talking heads as moment. I mean, like, because I always like to take an idea and take it further with an image or an animation. So, but I'm open. I always like a creative challenge, I guess. But I do feel like we've really gotten into our style. You know, the style of filmmaking is got a lot of layers. And, you know, I studied avant-garde film and film theory at school, so I would watch films like 3 times to see the layers. And I hope, you know, there's a lot of different things people get, which I love. But it's interesting that you're saying that. I think moments are good, and I probably don't put as much in as I could. I think my sound designer would say, "You're not giving me any time to do sound design."
Right, right. I mean, I just feel like, on one hand, with this film I'm making now, I have the ambition to make it really dense and, like, you know, really, really just feeding. But also, there's a pacing issue with moving image media. You know, you can make a book really dense. You know, you can be Joyce, or, I mean, who else would you think of as just a very dense writer?
Definitely Joyce. That would probably be the first.
Pynchon, right? I mean, somebody like Pynchon. And, you know, the person can figure it out at their own pace. But in a film, you can respect a viewer's intelligence, but you also can't assault them. And so, you know, it's you got to figure out what works. In other words.
Yeah, I'm excited. What stage are you, like? Tell me and all the people that are listening or watching, what stage are you at? I'm so excited to see. When can I see a rough cut?
All you people. We're cutting, and we have a lot of scenes that are cut, and a lot of scenes that aren't cut. So we've got a lot of raw material and a lot of, you know, like hours of some stuff that's done, some interviews and sound archives that need to be shaped. And the goal in the film is just to weave a lot of stuff in together, you know, so that you're on a journey where you will return to certain textures when it's time, and the arc of each element will make one big arc. So that's the structural goal, basically.
Sounds amazing.
You know, you've been there. You know.
I know. I mean, I remember it took so much longer to do Connected because it wasn't just feeling your way through, you know, and I'm excited for you, and I can't wait to see it, and I think it's really courageous. And I think that there needs to be more. There's still so few of these kind of films, and I think they offer, listen, understanding somebody else's perspective is always important. It makes you feel empathy, and it changes your thinking about things. And by telling your story of this very traumatic period of time with a lot of grief, I think grief is an amazing teacher, as I'm sure you know. I think you're going to share a lot of important things to people. So.
Yeah, and I just think you want to make work that makes people feel something and that makes people think and that makes them look at their own experience in a new light. That's the point of making a movie, you know. It's too much trouble to do, you know, if you weren't trying to connect to others and ask them to interrogate their own experience. I mean, that's the point of the medium. You know, it works in a way that nothing else does, except maybe opera. So, you know, very gay.
On that note, that was fantastic. Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you for moderating.
You want to say your Twitter handles in case if anybody has any follow-up comments or questions?
Well, yours just doesn't have an N at the end, which is very tricky.
My name without an N at the end.
And mine's just my name. And we're going to be, I can't decide if I'm going to leave this raw or if I'm going to edit it, but we'll have this up on our site, and we'll release this in our spring newsletter too. So.
Yeah, just if you do edit it, cut out the dumb stuff that I say.
Recreate a reality. Okay.
Yeah.
Great talking to you, Jennie.
This is awesome. I also feel like I'm entering a new era of technology because of you and Sawyer. Thank you so much, you guys.
Oh, we loved talking with you this way. And I have to say, I missed not being at Sundance. It was weird. I felt like a missing limb the whole week.
You were at Davos. I felt I was so sad not to be at Davos, even though I've never been there. But hey.
Hey, well, sometimes we'll switch places there, but have a good rest of Sundance. How do you have another screening, or are you?
I don't have another screen. I'm going to see movies and talk to people, and
Great.
pressure's off. Yay!
Yay! Okay, have a great rest of your week.
Thanks
Bye.
so much, you guys. Be
Bye.
well.